Salam Media. I am Jo Bluen, your guest presenter for today, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Faisal Ali, a digital journalist with Al Jazeera English, who has just written a really fascinating article on the plans by Israel to build a military base in Somaliland. Now, we've seen in December 2025, there was an announcement that Israel was recognizing Somaliland, a kind of geostrategic hub by the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden. We've seen these kind of security issues intensifying with the current US-Israel war on Iran. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Faisal Ali to talk to us about this. Welcome to the show.
Jo, thank you for the introduction.
Thank you so much for being with us. So just, you wrote this really interesting article, drawing on these two reports, I believe with with Bloomberg and a Swedish news outlet. Tell us a little bit about how we get to this plan to establish this military base in Somaliland.
Jo, I should probably open by saying it's a report that says Israel plans to open a base basically along the Gulf of Aden, which is Somaliland's northern coast. We haven't had anything official from Somaliland officials or Israeli officials. At the most, from Somaliland side, what we've had is senior officials saying that they don't want to rule the possibility out. But at the beginning of January, the Somaliland Foreign Ministry kind of said that there are no current plans. It's been a bit confusing for reporters, basically, because on the other hand, we've kind of seen statements from foreign ministry officials, so not necessarily the foreign minister himself, saying that that's something which is on the table and we're considering it. But long story short, after Israel recognized Somaliland, which happened in December, late last year, the first big question for everybody was, what was the quid pro quo, basically, what was offered in exchange for this? The Israeli government hasn't given any confirmation. We've seen statements from the foreign minister, Gideon Saar, who said that security cooperation was a big deal. And of course, people are kind of looking at the geographic region within which the Somaliland government is basically. So it's directly across the Gulf of Aden, about 500 kilometers from one of Israel's most formidable regional foes, the Houthis, in the northwest of Yemen. And so a lot of people have basically connected the dots, and then listening to Israeli analysts as well, who have said themselves frequently that it puts them within striking distance of the Houthis. And so if you kind of contrast where they were prior to this agreement with Somaliland, they would have to travel around 2,000 kilometers over the Red Sea, around a series of governments, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Sudan, who have either bad or hostile relations at the present moment with the Israeli government. And so that was probably the longest distance they've ever had to strike in order to go after one of their opponents. And so the assumption is basically that if they get a base along the Gulf of Aden, it kind of cuts that by a quarter. So from 2,000 kilometers to around 500 kilometers, and it improves their ability to gather intelligence on the Houthis. An organization which, according to reports in Israeli media, we understand that the Israeli government didn't really have much information about. They killed the Houthi prime minister in August 2025, which suggests they're kind of quickly developing that capability on the go. But in any case, security was understood, and it still is understood to be a major part of it. What the Somali government basically has been saying right from the announcement of this agreement between Somaliland and Israel is that Israel had two primary objectives. One of them was to displace or ethnically cleanse Gaza and move a large population of Palestinians to Somaliland. That was something that confused a lot of people, just because logistically speaking, it would be impossible. The Egyptian government, of course, opposes it. Saudi Arabia opposes it. Somaliland's government hasn't completely ruled it out, except for that statement in January this year. But I think a lot of people just thought it was unrealistic. And then in addition to that, conversations I've had with Somaliland officials have said that wasn't one of the concessions that they made. And then Gideon Saar, Israel's foreign minister, said that that wasn't necessarily actually part of the deal. The security element is the thing which hasn't been completely ruled out, although we haven't had solid confirmation. We had those two reports, one by Bloomberg and one by Israel's public broadcaster, citing officials within Somaliland's government who have said plans are going ahead. But those two officials, which were cited in both stories, were speaking anonymously. And so I think that the increase in reports around this, it was worth kind of putting it to the Somali foreign minister and saying, what do you think about what we're hearing and a lot of the speculation that's going on? But at the present moment, we haven't seen anything kind of concrete or solid emerge. There was a South African think tank, earlier this year, which kind of assessed satellite imagery from Berbera Airport. So that's the airport of the city along the Gulf of Aden, which showed that a lot of work had been done in order to kind of create the type of infrastructure required to host advanced military capabilities. But Somaliland does have an existing agreement with the United Arab Emirates to host its military, and so it's not necessarily the case that that's specifically for Israel. But the reason for why I personally don't think that should be ruled out is because AFP, the French news agency, and I'll conclude on this point, I've said it quite a lot.
Take your time. Fascinating.
They cited an unnamed Western diplomat who told them that that Western country or Western countries are operating with the assumption that there is already an Israeli security presence in Berbera. And so I think, we're really just hungry for very clear and transparent information about this, because the implications are quite serious. Needless to say, Somalia is already a war-torn country. It's in a region which is either on the precipice of a larger war, so Ethiopia and Eritrea, or countries like Sudan, who have, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, been completely destroyed, hundreds of thousands, if millions of people displaced, at least 100,000 people killed. And so the concern for the Somali government is that they get drawn even more deeply into what's unfolding in the Middle East, without the capacity that some of those Middle Eastern states obviously have to manage the fallout.
I mean, I think this is a really interesting idea, and and these conversations, because one of the things we know, if you look at U.S. military presence in Africa through AFRICOM, it has been extraordinarily destabilizing for states and regions in Africa, and I think at the same time we've seen a proliferation of Israeli presence, not necessarily military presence, although that too, throughout Africa, and kind of efforts to buy off African leaders, kind of talks about displacing Palestinians further and sort of placing them in African states. What do you think are the kind of risks for the region? I know you've kind of alluded to that around Sudan. What do you think, with the Horn being such a volatile space, what do you think are the risks for the region should this materialize?
I think the first place, if I kind of zoom out and look at it through that lens, is that the kind of alignments which have emerged in the Middle East over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, especially since the signing of the Abraham Accords agreements between governments like Morocco, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, is that we've seen that kind of play out to some extent, obviously in the Horn of Africa, where countries have quite close proximity, obviously, to the Gulf states, but in addition to that, have kind of close strategic, economic, political ties. And so the decisions by governments over there obviously affect the alignments of states in the Horn of Africa. If I kind of give you your listeners a brief picture, there are those countries in the Horn of Africa which are kind of aligned with the United Arab Emirates and Israel, broadly speaking. Those include Ethiopia, Kenya, Somaliland, and the Rapid Support Forces in Sudan, and they form kind of part of a bloc, basically. And then, to varying different degrees, you have a separate bloc which has emerged around Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the federal Somali government, and other countries that are kind of concerned, broadly speaking, about Israel's activities over the course of the last several months, but even over the course of the last year. And we saw that kind of play out very dramatically in a kind of heads butting, basically, between Saudi Arabia and the Emirati government. Sorry.
No, I'm fascinated by this, but we have to have a short break, but we will be back with you to talk more about regional dynamics. So I think you really are highlighting some of the rifts and splits and dynamics that are going on. We are with Faisal Ali, digital journalist with Al Jazeera English on News and Views. We'll be back after a short break. Thank you.
This Ramadan, give the gift of clean water with African Muslims Agency. With every water well or borehole you donate, your drop becomes a river, reconnecting communities to nourishment, education, dignity, and empowerment. Sponsor a water well for 16,500 Rand in Africa or a borehole for 65,000 Rand in Afghanistan or Africa. Quench the thirst, reconnect the soul with Africa Muslims Agency.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, now we cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic Sharia and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Hey, Gulam.
Yeah?
Did I return your lawnmower last month?
No, bye, you didn't.
Oh, no. Now what'll I do? I wanted to borrow it again, man.
With Randry Jewelers, you won't have to borrow or lend because the prices are so well trimmed on all gold and diamond jewelry. Alternatively, we could remake your old jewelry into a brilliant new design. Visit Randry Jewelers at 151 Stevens Lamini Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randry Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
This Ramadan, please consider donating to the Islamic Dawah movement. For over 45 years, IDM has built over 80 masjids and distributed more than 160,000 Qurans in 8 local languages. IDM has installed over 250 boreholes and water wells. Over 1,000 children are fed daily, building strong Muslim communities in disadvantaged areas.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Good morning and welcome back to News and Views. I am with Faisal Ali, a digital journalist from Al Jazeera English, who has just written a really fascinating article on the Israeli intention to establish a military base in Somaliland. We've just been having a fascinating conversation before the break about the kind of geostrategic importance of Somaliland in the region, at the Gulf of Aden, by the Red Sea. So I wanted to ask you, Faisal, obviously we've seen in the last few weeks the US-Israel war in Iran kind of intensifying, and the Strait of Hormuz being closed off. So I wondered how this potential decision will affect that, or how it speaks to that.
The main concern basically in the region has been that the conflict could potentially spread to the Horn of Africa. And we saw a statement by the US Embassy in Djibouti, which is a country that neighbors Somalia to the west and sits just across from Yemen, along the Bab el-Mandeb waterway and then onto the Red Sea, advising American citizens to stay away from Camp Laminia, which is the largest US permanent base in Africa. That signals the possibility for me, at the very least, that they're aware of the potential for Iran to kind of think about expanding its conflict with the US further. They've said, obviously, that any US facilities are a legitimate target. And then, of course, the Houthis in Yemen, one of Iran's probably most powerful, most intact regional allies, are literally within striking distance of that. And so I think that the way this potentially could kind of blow out into the Horn of Africa, mainly for the Somali government, is the major concern that if the Houthis begin striking or Iran begins striking, that they could be drawn into this conflagration and end up in a scenario like the Gulf states, but without the air defense missiles, or the interceptors rather, to protect civilian populations. And that was one of the things that the Somali State Minister for Foreign Affairs told me in that interview, in which he said that it wasn't in the interests of the Somali people to get involved in this, and explicitly warned that usually it's civilians which suffer the worst. And it's not just the risk, Joe, of missiles actually hitting the city, but the disruptions that causes, obviously, to aviation, to maritime traffic, the ability to import and export. And Somalia, a lot like the Gulf, basically relies to a great extent on international trade for a lot of the food that people have in the country. And so they really can't afford, already not necessarily being a wealthy country, to have that level of disruption taking place.
I mean, I think it's really an interesting point. You know, if you look at a kind of longer trajectory around peace and conflict and security in Somalia, Somaliland, and specifically, you know, in the Horn of Africa in general, we all remember Black Hawk Down, right? We all remember these histories. So, I think this is a really fascinating point that you're making here. I want to ask you, what should we be watching out for? Because obviously there's a lot of speculation. We have the two reports. What should we be watching out for in the next little while in terms of these developments?
I think the Houthis have made, for me, two very important statements, basically. When Somaliland initially was recognized by Israel, they said they considered it a hostile move by the Israeli government, and that it was, from their perspective, any Israeli president, from their perspective, would be a legitimate target. That was a statement, I think, which was made by Abdul Malik Houthi, the Houthi leader. So it speaks to the thinking in Sana'a, in the capital of Yemen, at the present moment. They've also said since, Joe, that they got their finger on the trigger, so to speak, with regards to the US and Israeli attack on Iran. And so what they're signaling is that they're more than prepared, to go ahead and carry out a strike. I've been reading a lot of work by Yemeni analysts on why the Houthis haven't got involved so far. I mean, it's been 2 weeks. Iran has absorbed probably the brunt of the violence, including on really important civilian infrastructure in and around Tehran. And so people have been wondering why they haven't tagged in probably one of their most important trump card, sorry to use that pun, but along the Red Sea as well. And the analyst, which I read about 2-3 days ago, suggested there are differences in Iran over whether they should use them or rely on the a relationship they have with the Houthis at this stage, or that they should kind of draw that in at a much more critical moment to kind of improve their leverage. And so what we should probably be looking out for is any reports indicating that the Houthis may potentially take active measures themselves. I think the thing we should remind listeners is that the Houthis previously, when Israel was carrying out a genocidal campaign in Gaza, had blockaded all Israeli ships from passing through the Red Sea, and that more broadly disrupted global shipping through the Red Sea as well, which carries something like 12 to 13% of global trade, a large amount, and connects Europe basically with the markets of the Gulf and then further along East Asia. But then in addition to that, obviously, they have the capacity to fire missiles, not just in the direction of Israel, and have proven the capacity to hit Israel. I think they, in August or May, I think it was, in 2025, actually hit Israel's main international airport and caused huge disruption to flying over there. But I think that's an indicator of how much damage it could potentially do to kind of poorer, less well-equipped countries in the Horn of Africa, which, as I was saying earlier, are themselves already kind of struggling with existing, ongoing, and the legacies of previous conflicts as well.
I mean, this is so you've made I want to pick up on that because we've got the kind of military side of it, the destabilization of the region, but now you've kind of brought in this maritime issue around trade, and the Houthis obviously kind of threatening. And I always think it's quite remarkable with kind of it's very limited resources, the extent to which they can really disrupt conflict and trade. So talk us through a little bit. I'm conscious of time, but I would really like to know from you what are the potential implications of this base and this presence in terms of global trade and that very important both geostrategic, geopolitical, but also geoeconomic region.
Do you mean the Houthi base, the American base in Djibouti? Sorry, just to clarify.
The U.S. Israel base in Somaliland, and the implications for the Houthis and the ability, kind of the strategic place in terms of trade, maritime trade through that region.
The Houthi blockade of Israeli shipping in the Red Sea caused major disruptions. Even huge shipping companies like Maersk and others refused for that period to kind of go through the Red Sea. They had to kind of go all the way around Africa, passing by you guys in South Africa on the way to Europe or whatever other market those ships needed to head to. And so at a time when the Strait of Hormuz is already closed, basically, which carries something like 20% of global gas and trade and about 30%, I think, of global fertilizer, to have the Red Sea also closed would have a huge impact, I think, on a variety of different types of global markets, and would be alarming, I think, for not just global powers as well, but a lot of countries along the Suez Canal, like Egypt and Sudan, which rely on the ports in that region to import food and other kind of goods. And so my sense is it would be a massive deal. And I think that's why Iran is kind of holding back at the moment on taking that huge step. Joe, the other reason why this would be a big deal is, I mean, you just have to take a look at the number of countries that have military bases in Djibouti, which kind of rents out that coastline. Basically, you have France, Italy, Japan, the US, even China has a naval facility in Djibouti, and it's because they want to ensure that they can kind of take care of ships heading in both directions, trade which is kind of outgoing and then stuff which is ingoing, specifically through that very important choke point. It doesn't take much, unfortunately, because our global system is so vulnerable to disrupt ships. All you have to do is kind of fire a couple of missiles or drones, and then it kind of scares away insurers and people who are kind of overseeing the people who are kind of like on the ships, basically taking care of making sure that the goods can travel, and so from that perspective, basically you have to take that into consideration, is my sense. And that's one of the major reasons why people don't want to go through the Strait of Hormuz at the moment, because they haven't got that kind of guarantee. It isn't necessarily the case that Iran would do anything, but if there's any kind of confusion, or it wasn't known what type of ship it was or who the ship belongs to, even if the drone misses, you'd probably not want to be on a ship in the middle of the sea.
Faisal Ali, thank you so much. I mean, you've just shared such a wealth of knowledge, and I think so important to connect. Very often the kind of Middle East, North Africa kind of divisions enables us to fail to see the connections. So thank you so much for sharing of your encyclopedic knowledge with us. I hope you'll be back soon. We'll be back with you on News and Views after a short break. Thank you, Faisal.
Thanks, Joe. Take care.
You too.